Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our Accelerated ID. Today, we're going to be talking about the 4-step Instructional Design Transition Plan. Let me introduce myself just so that you know a little bit about me. My name is Shawntay, and I know that that last name is a doozy. So you know that I must have really loved him to take that last name, right? Any other doozy last names out here? Okay, so I'm a former 5th and 6th grade social studies and science teacher. I was a teacher in Texas, and a life event happened, right, that made me no longer interested in teaching. I needed to pursue other things. So I transitioned out of the classroom into a career of instructional design. I didn't even know what it was. So I'll be honest, I got really lucky in finding that job because I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any skills. But at that time, I lucked out. Couldn't do that same kind of transition today without the skill or the knowledge development. And we'll really talk about that today. I have worked in higher education as an instructional designer. In higher education, there's really kind of 2 domains that you could go down as an instructional designer. I have worked in both. I have worked as a corporate instructional designer. I've done freelance instructional design. I've worked in a nonprofit doing instructional design. So I've really been in all the different settings and the spaces that most of you would be interested in at some point as far as instructional design goes. As an instructional designer, I've worn all the hats. We'll talk about ID roles here in just a minute. I have been just an instructional designer who would write all the creative side and pass it off to an eLearning developer or to a graphic designer to design. I've been the eLearning developer. I've been the LMS administrator. I've been the facilitator. So I've really done all the L&D hats that you can do. I have served as adjunct faculty. I provide today with the Instructional Design Company. That's what we do. We provide instructional design services to client companies who are looking for some kind of instructional design product to either use with their staff or to turn around and sell to their customer base. I provide coaching. I'm a town commissioner for my little town that I live in, the founder of the Instructional Design Company and the Hangout. But most importantly, I'm a wifey, a mom, a mommy, and an Aunt Tay-Tay. So that's a little bit about me. Let's dive into our 4-step instructional design plan. And again, this is a part of a series. So I will introduce you to this today, and then we'll come back in February and take a deep dive into each of these steps. So I do want to start out just by saying that you'll notice here on the screen that I put different shoes next to each of these steps. I know that's kind of silly, but it's important for us to not judge ourselves and our own progress by the progress that somebody else is making or by the journey that someone else is making. I think I saw some self-studies here. So some people might want to do self-study. Some people might want to get a master's degree. Some people might want to get a certificate. Everybody's journey is different, and I want to celebrate that, and I want to encourage you not to judge yourself by someone else's measuring stick and what they are doing and what is right for them, because what is right for them might not be right for you. So always make decisions that are right for you. So as we are talking about these things, just kind of keep that in mind. It's about growth. It's about your growth and your transformation, and not the growth or transformation of somebody else. So our 4-step plan is really simple. It's not rocket science, but it can get harder because of the details that are in each of these. So step one of our 4-step plan is to know your ID destination. And I'll explain to you what this means in just a second. 2, you want to identify your ID skills and knowledge gaps. And then after you've identified those, you're going to get to work on filling in those gaps, right? Where you are today versus where you want to go, fill in that gap so that you get closer to your goals. And then we're going to talk about step 4 is applying for jobs that you are truly qualified for. So in the very simplest of forms, that is our 4-step instructional design transition plan. So now let me walk you through each of these steps. Again, we're going to have this high level overview, and then we're going to come back and take a really deep dive into each of these. So step 1, know your ID destination. Again, we have some folks here, many folks that are aspiring instructional designers. Now, depending on where you are in that aspiring instructional designer journey, you might be brand spanking new. You might have just heard about instructional design yesterday or last week, and you're not even sure what that means. Or you might already be working on some of these things, right? And in that case, you might already know what kind of instructional designer you want to be. Maybe you're in a bunch of Facebook groups for instructional design and getting started in instructional design. But what I want to talk to you about are the different kinds of settings that instructional designers work in. And I want to talk about the different role types that there are. And then I'll give you some strategies on how you can figure out what kind of instructional designer you want to be. So we're going to start first with instructional design settings. And I told you about this during my intro about me, whenever I was saying that I have worked in higher ed, I've worked in nonprofit, I've worked in corporate, I've worked as a freelance instructional designer. Now, this is all important information for you to know because you got to know what you're working towards, right? Let's use an example real quick. I'm going to give you two quick ones, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about these. If you were going on vacation, let's say that all that you knew about your vacation was that you wanted to rent a cabin in the mountains somewhere, right? So the very first thing that you would do is you would start exploring mountain areas and cabins. Now, based on what your particular interests are, maybe you're a family, maybe you're newlyweds, but based on what your interests are, based on where you are in your life, you would make decisions about where you ultimately rented that cabin, right? So if you're a family, you might want to rent a cabin in a place that has hiking trails that are good for kids. Or if you're newlyweds, maybe you want something that's more your speed. Maybe you want some wineries where you can do some wine tastings. Or maybe you want to play golf, so you want to be near pretty close to a really nice golf course, right? You've got to know your destination so that you can make plans towards that destination. Or if you know that you want to be a doctor, or maybe someone you know wants to be a doctor. Well, there are all kinds of doctors out there. What kind of doctor do you want to be, right? So you have to do some sort of self-assessment to figure out what interests you. Are you interested in the eyes? Are you interested in the ears? Are you interested in the heart? Are you interested in being a general practitioner, right? So you've got to know some things that interest you so that you can figure out what your destination is. Now, the same is true for instructional design. So we want to know what kind of setting you want to work in. Do you want to work in a corporate setting where you are creating learning experiences for employees or maybe even for customers of the company? Typically in a corporate environment, you're paid a little bit better. You have more opportunities as far as advancement or expanding knowledge, participating in professional development. Or maybe you're interested more in the higher ed sphere, right? Higher ed is a little bit not as hectic or fast paced sometimes as our corporate environment is, but it does often come with some really nice perks, like free education if you wanted to pursue a master's degree. Some universities provide pension plans. Universities often have some really nice days off. Some have like Fridays off in the summer or take a week off at spring break. It really just depends on the university. So you could check out those perks. And then there's freelance. Maybe you want to be all in on owning your schedule, or maybe you just want some part-time or spare time to have a little extra cash. So these are all things that you're going to want to answer for yourself so that you know what you are working towards, right? So in addition to that setting, we have to figure out what kind of ID do we want to be. Do we want to be the instructional designer that is only doing the instructional design where you're writing the script, you're creating the engagement experiences, you're working with the subject matter experts, you're interviewing them, you're pulling out that important information, you're taking that and then you're creating a learning experience around it? Or maybe you want to be the person that information is handed off to create the learning materials, either online and e-learning as an e-learning developer, or the slides or the facilitator guides. Every organization is set up differently, right? So it's important to know where your interests lie. Or maybe you want to be the person that can do it all. I want to do the instructional design. I want to do the e-learning. I want to do the graphic design because you like all of those things. So it's important to know these things so that whenever we talk about what your skill gaps are, we know where to put your attention on those. All right. And again, whenever we come back in February, we're going to really break this down. But one tip for you, if you want to just figure out now, like you're like, oh, Shawntay, I can't wait till February. I need to know what my gaps are today. One thing that you can do, you can go out to LinkedIn, you can go out to Indeed, you could go out to Google Jobs and start searching for jobs. Find 3 or 4 jobs that are really interesting to you in your space. If you're interested in higher ed, you can go out to the Chronicles of Education. There's some different higher ed sites that have job postings there so that you could check that out. You could go look at universities near you and look at some of their L&D roles that are open and use that as your guide. But whatever it is, corporate or higher ed or nonprofit or ed tech, whatever interests you, go through those job descriptions and start highlighting the things that are mentioned on those job descriptions, because that will tell you the knowledge that you need, the skills that you need, and the tools that you need to develop proficiency in, right? So that will help you identify what those ID, skill, and knowledge gaps are. So again, I mentioned that at the very beginning of our episode today is that we're all in a different place, right? Some of you might be right here at the very beginning. You know, you just learned about instructional design. You just know that you need to get out of whatever career that you are in today. Some of you might be over here. Then some of you might already be here, and some of you might be right here, right? Someone said that they had an interview yesterday. So they're definitely looking like they might be over here, which is awesome. But again, don't judge yourself based on the progress that someone else has made. Your journey is your journey. So I always like to highlight that. But today, what I'm asking you to do is, after you have figured out what setting you want to be in, what kind of instructional designer that you want to be, then I want you to go and list the different skills that you saw, because you need to make a plan to get from right here where you are to over here, right? Because that's what we're ultimately here for. It's about getting that ID job. It's not about hanging out with me. I mean, I'm glad that you're here, but you're not here for me. You are here for you to get your instructional design job. All right, so here is just a list of some of the common skills and knowledge areas that you will need to work on if you're going to be a corporate instructional designer or if you're going to be a freelance instructional designer. So I pulled this list from our certificate program that we have, the Instructional Design and Tech Accelerator program. These are some of the skills and knowledge areas that we work on with our students. So take a quick look at this, and I want you to do a self-assessment. How many of these skills do you have right now? And if you're at 0, that is okay, because again, your journey is your journey. Don't measure yourself against somebody else's measuring stick. We've got to close that gap to get you to your ID job, right? There are many ways that you can do this. So you can go self-study. If you have a full-time job and you're self-study, I'm estimating it's probably going to take you around a year. You could do it in less if you've really got a lot of dedicated time. You could go a certificate route. You could find an academy. The Association of Training and Development has some really great certificates out there, 2 to 9 months, anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000, right? You could go after a master's degree, but I will tell you right now, you do not need a master's degree. You've already got a bachelor's degree. You don't need a master's degree. But if you want one, go for it, right? I got the job and then I got the master's degree. I got 2 master's degrees, but it will take you 2 or more years to do that. And depending on the school that you go to, and I did a Google search a couple of days ago just to get what the going rate of a master's program for a state university is. It's like $29,000 and some change. If you go private, it's going to be even more expensive. Again, I mentioned the certificate route. So we have a certificate program. Ours is the Instructional Design and Tech Accelerator program. It takes 3 to 6 months, depending on how much time that you have. And it's around $1,490. Whatever path that you choose to take, because again, your journey is your journey. Whatever is right for you is right for you. There are some things that I want you to consider whenever you are making that decision, okay? Is there a quality curriculum that you've got lifetime access to? In the beginning, that might not sound like, oh, why do I need that? Because once I learn it, I learn it. Well, you will find as you go down this path of instructional design that there is something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And unless there are specific strategies put in place in your learning experience, you're going to forget a lot of what you learn. So it's really great to have a just-in-time resource that you can reference back to when you need it. So the person that went on the interview yesterday, maybe they get the job and they start in 2 weeks, and then their boss comes and says, hey, I need you to build this interaction in Storyline 360. Oh, you can say, great, because you've got your resource that you have access to that you can go back to and refer to. So you want a quality curriculum that has lifetime access. Better if it's created by a practitioner of our trade versus someone who's only studied it in books. But again, it just depends on what you're looking for. I recommend that you find a live coaching element. Now, that doesn't have to be through your program. If your program has it, amazing. But you can also do this through mentors. You can do this through joining networking groups where you have co-working sessions, right? There are many ways to get coaching. In the Facebook groups that you're a part of, you can ask for people to review your work. You could pay coaches to do it. There's many ways to do this. I also recommend work reviews with feedback. This is priceless. You want someone to go through your needs analysis, through your outline, through your script, looking at your learning engagement activities, looking at your storyline, looking at your rise, give feedback on your videos, right? You want someone to look at that and give you constructive feedback so that you can learn, grow, and improve as an instructional designer. Because once it comes to your portfolio, you want something that is going to impress your prospective employers. You don't want something that goes, they've tried, right? I'm going to give them credit because they tried. You really want something that they go, oh, wow, Charmin knows exactly what they are doing, right? Oh, I love that storyline that they created. So it's important that you have that. Now, the one other thing that I would recommend on Get to Work filling in your gap is right now, be bold. Give yourself a date by which you're going to start applying for jobs. Give yourself a date by what time you are going to be finished filling in all these gaps that you have. So again, if you're at 10%, when are you going to get to 90%? Put that date in our chat here. Make a commitment today, right? So no matter what path you go, there is only one way to an instructional design job, and that's to get skilled up and to get knowledgeable, and you need to do that this year. Okay, so let's talk about step 4. So we've talked about step 1, you need to know your ID destination. Step 2, you need to identify what your skill and knowledge gaps are. And step 3, you need to get busy on filling those gaps. Step 4 is applying for jobs that you are truly qualified for. Let me say that again, that you are truly qualified for, all right? And teachers, I'm going to talk to you for just a second because there is a misconception that I just want to clear up, okay? I have heard statements from individuals saying that they are told that teachers are instructional designers. And that's just not true. Teachers are not instructional designers yet, right? You will be, but you are not an instructional designer yet. And so what that means is that you can't walk out of the classroom and start applying for instructional design jobs thinking that you have all the skills to be an instructional designer. Unfortunately, that's just not true. What is true is that you have a huge foundation to build from, right? You have that foundation, just like in your classroom. Remember, I'm a former teacher, how we would scaffold our students, like we would build the foundation and we'd scaffold, build another layer of the foundation, scaffold, build another layer of the foundation. So that is what you have. You have a really strong foundation to scaffold from. You understand how to design learning experiences for students. You understand how to design assessments for students. You understand how to write objectives. I will say that objectives, there's probably going to be a little bit different than what you've seen, but you haven't yet become proficient in adult learning theory. You haven't yet become proficient in the different models. You don't have to know all of them, but there are some that you need to know, or the theories or the practice. I'm willing to bet that there's things like the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Like, this may be the first time that you've heard of this. But there are just other things. So again, you've got a really solid foundation, and I don't want to discredit that in any way. But what I don't want you to do is to put yourself in a situation where you have put 200 resumes out there and you haven't gotten any bites on it because someone told you that you are an instructional designer. You're just not an instructional designer yet, right? So you got to do that skill development. You've got to learn the tools. You've got to develop some proficiency in this, and you've got to have that portfolio that really demonstrates that you can do these things. All right. So now that we've talked about qualified, because again, you got to be really qualified, and you can get qualified through the self-study, the certificates, the academies, the master degree program, our Instructional Design and Tech Accelerator program, many ways to become skilled. Now, let's assume that you've done all of that. So whenever you go to apply for jobs, you need to have what we call an optimized resume. And what we mean by optimize is that it performs well with an applicant tracking system. So an applicant tracking system is a software that employers often use to collect resumes and score resumes. And they're scoring the resumes based on keywords that were used in the job description and seeing the number of times that those keywords were listed in your resume. So you need an optimized resume. You need a cover letter. And I would say that you also need a LinkedIn. And believe it or not, you need an optimized LinkedIn. And resumes and LinkedIn, the way that they are set up, are not the same. So you don't just take your resume data and plug it into your LinkedIn. There are different strategies that you need to implement so that your LinkedIn is optimized. Again, we're going to talk about that in February. You need a solid portfolio that has really quality assets in it. Depending on the type of instructional designer in the setting that you want to go for, you need to have assets that demonstrate your skill sets for that role in that setting. So again, going back to those job descriptions that I suggested that you go and you research, go pull some of those out. Figure out what kind of work that you will do. If it says storyline, create something in storyline. If it says rise, create something in rise. If it says that you're going to be creating facilitator guides, have a facilitator guide in your portfolio. So if your resume gets past the applicant tracking system, they're probably going to check your LinkedIn. At that point, if they call you for an interview, they may ask to see your portfolio up front, or they may ask to see it after the interview, right? So it's kind of like a progression. So you've done all these things, you've got a call for an interview. Now you've got to nail the interview. So in the interview, you've got to be able to walk the talk. You've got to be able to talk through examples, which you could talk through your portfolios. If you've volunteered, any work that you've done, whether it's on projects, things like that, you want to pull that into your interview process. You've got to talk the language. You've got to know things about the company, right? So there are just certain things that you need in order to have an effective interview. If you are getting called for interviews, you go on interviews, and you're not getting past that interview point, you might want to do some practice or mock interviews with someone who can give you some coaching on what it is that you can do different to perform better in that interview process. So you can hop over to instructionaldesigncompany.com and click on free ID resources. It's in the free downloads. And I want to say it's around 30 pages, and it's just full of examples of things that you can use to really set up your resume. There are some other tools and things there too. For those of you who are asking about the Accelerator program, I love that you were asking, and I could talk about Accelerator all day. There's all the details on our website, instructionaldesigncompany.com/courses. We run our course 24/7, 365, which means that you could start today, get access to everything. We have live coaching. It's just built into the program, so you don't have to wait for a launch day.